on Guam's only News Talk Superstation, 93.3 The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Coming back online, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The operator of the Colonial Gas Pipeline says they've begun restarting their systems, shut down 5 days ago in the midst of a ransomware attack by hackers. Fox's Brian Yennis reports none too soon.
According to Gas Buddy, 69% of North Carolina's gas stations are now out of fuel. 52% of Virginia's gas pumps are empty. So too are about half of the gas stations in Georgia. All 3 states have issued states of emergency. So too has Florida over fears of gas shortages and price gouging.
It will take several days for the pipeline to be back to normal operations. Until then, shortages aren't likely to continue. President Biden ordering federal agencies to tighten their cyber defenses with things like multi-level authentication for computer access. Software vendors are also being told to make sure their products are up to the latest security standards. No end in sight to the ongoing violence in the Gaza Strip.
Hamas has resumed fire on central Israel, and the group is now targeting the northern part of the country. The Israelis took extensive rocket fire throughout the day. Some of those rockets slipped past Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome, slamming into residential areas and killing a 6-year-old boy.
Fox's Trey Yingst reports the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved more retaliatory strikes against Hamas inside Gaza. Secretary of State Blinken appealing to Palestinian President Abbas to halt the rocket attacks. The Centers for Disease Control has added its approval to offering the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine to children as young as 12. Ohio will lift most coronavirus restrictions in 3 weeks from now. Governor Mike DeWine telling residents,
"You've followed the protocols. You've done what we've asked you to do. You've bravely fought this virus."
Restrictions will remain in place at Ohio nursing homes. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
After meeting with congressional leaders from both parties, President Biden says he's optimistic about an infrastructure agreement.
I think we can have a deal. And there are ways in which we can pay for this without just putting the entire burden on working class and middle class people.
House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy says there'll be no deal if it means new taxes.
You won't find any Republicans going to go raise taxes. I think that's the worst thing you can do in this economy when you watch inflation. Your gas is going up. That to us is a non-starter.
How much to spend and what qualifies as infrastructure are still points in contention. A big piece of highway infrastructure remains closed, the I-40 bridge over the Mississippi River. The Arkansas Department of Transportation says the inspectors who discovered a large crack in one of the bridge's steel beams probably prevented a disaster. The bridge will be closed indefinitely. Congresswoman Liz Cheney has been removed from the House GOP leadership team.
Republicans bounced Liz Cheney from leadership for challenging former President Trump. Cheney is as defiant as ever. Cheney says Republicans must stand up to the former president, even as some of her colleagues defend him. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy used a visit with President Biden to suggest Republicans moved on. But former President Trump declared the election the big lie last week, and Cheney doubled down. Former President Trump described Cheney as a bitter, horrible human being adding she lacks anything good having to do with politics or our country. It took Liz Cheney only one term in Congress to climb into the House GOP leadership in 2018, and only 15 minutes for those same Republicans to expel Cheney from her leadership slot in a secret, non-recorded vote.
Fox's Chad Pergram at the Capitol. Shots fired at a New York City police officer in the borough of Brooklyn Wednesday night. The officer spared serious injuries by his bulletproof vest. The NYPD says they've arrested the shooter. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with a remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76circlekguam.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What I say every day, it's the hallmark of this show. The Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, a conservative approach to politics, the economy, and life. That's what Tall Tales is all about. So if that's what you're interested in, you're in the right place. If it's not what you're interested in, even more so, you're in the right place because you need a little education. You need to get yourself squared away. And Tall Tales is the place to do it. From the Second Amendment part of the show, I go straight to Zemi Ikotny. Today I'm going to deviate from the usual routine. You know, I've been beating up unmercifully on the Daily News for over a year because they weren't running local editorials. They were running boilerplate from Gannett News Service and USA Today. They've now started running local editorials, although USA Today, as you were, Gannett News Service and USA Today doesn't own the Daily News anymore. There's still an awful lot of USA Today left over at the Daily News. And their editorials, frankly, have, you know, I think since they've been writing them, they've gotten 1 blue star compared to about 5 from the Post. They still got a lot of work to do. Today is no different. Our view, we must be ready when federal pandemic funds ends. You know where this is going to go. You know, the federal fund's not going to last forever. You're going to have to start supporting yourself, take advantage of training opportunities, etc. And here's how the editorial winds up. All of us, in fact, need to be prepared for when Uncle Sam cuts the purse strings. The government of Guam must work with the business community on strategies and plans to stimulate and diversify the economy quickly. When federal funds go away, it would be best that we have our economic recovery on its way rather than dealing with the fallout. Like, you need to have somebody tell you all this stuff, you know? Yeah. Sort of like living in Wisconsin, you know, and it's one of those really nice September days, and your mother says, Bob, don't forget to put snow tires on your car. Get your winter clothes out. It's nice out today, but it's not going to last much longer. Yeah, things you wouldn't know if somebody didn't tell you, correct? So I'm not going to waste any time on this so-called editorial. Today we have a real treat. The publisher of the Daily News herself, Rindrati Celis Limtiako, has written an op-ed piece for the Post. And I'm going to tip my hat. It's frightening to think that the publisher of one of our daily news is so misinformed and so anxious to expose her lack of knowledge in a daily newspaper. I'm kind of grateful that she did, because her piece, her op-ed piece here, is almost like a checklist of all of the misinformation that's floating around about the Insular cases, and it'll give me a handy reference to correct the record on all of these things. Here's how she starts out. The issue of the Insular cases isn't always easy to understand, especially for people who have not taken the time to read even one like Downs versus Bidwell. It can be complicated for the same reason. Unfortunately, even on our island, where the issue sits at the heart of our existence.
You don't say.
At the heart of our existence. Now, if one of your reporters wrote a story like that, you'd get your blue pencil out quick. Exaggeration for effect doesn't work very well in a newspaper.
Guam started with the Insular cases.
Yes, in the beginning. God created the earth, and he said, let there be Insular cases. Yeah, she goes on to say the issue can cause eyes to gloss over and holds way less interest than the dispersal of tax refunds. Whose fault is that, Rindrati? You're in the newspaper business. If you had actual coverage with some depth of this of Tina's Resolution 56, people's eyes wouldn't gloss over. You know, Rindrati, with your newspaper, the Post, the 2 TV stations, and me, and I've got an awfully heavy burden here. May he rest in peace, but Rush is gone. And that just increases the burden on me. And I never got any help from Rush on local issues. Going on, the issue is important. It deserves attention. It sits at the heart of the federal government's justification for discrimination against Guam and other territories. I get a kick out of this federal, you know, how many times do I have to go through this? Rindrati, there is not a nice white building in Washington, D.C. with the classic Doric columns in front and a brass plaque over the door that says, "Screw Guam Bureau." You know, with 100 folks, 100 bureaucrats in there rapidly pounding away on word processors, figuring some way to screw the island of Guam. That just doesn't happen. The federal government, if there is an entity called the federal government, knows little and cares less about the island of Guam. At worst, what we get from the federal government is benign neglect. So when you're talking about, quote, the federal government, There are 3 branches. There are countless bureaucrats. You really kind of got to narrow it down a little bit. Because I don't think, as an example, the Office of Rural Electrification is discriminating against Guam. Somehow I don't think that's happening. And then she goes on to say, because our very existence as Guam is dependent on a territorial clause that created us and continues to separate us from the rest of the United States. Our rights are at the whim of Congress, which has shown a willingness to discriminately deny Guam access to federal programs. How awful of them, just because we don't pay into the Treasury. She says, we do not have the same constitutional rights and privileges that American citizens in the 50 states have. Surprised? I'm surprised because that's wrong. We do have the same rights and privileges as any other American does. And when you're talking federal programs, that's a matter that certainly is within the realm of Congress. It's not a matter that comes from the territorial, from the insular cases. She goes on to say, raised and educated, but not so much, on Guam, I really wasn't taught much about our political status.
That was the most revealing part of this so far.
Yeah, and it kind of shows, Rindrati. And, of course, whatever you happen to be able to put in your head before you got out of high school, that's the limit. Don't ever bother. You know, this idea of being a lifelong learner, I could tell you, it's a waste of time, you know. Enjoy yourself. It's later than you think. Okay, what did we learn? For the most part, residents of Guam became U.S. citizens through the Organic Act in 1950, period. That period is missing quite a bit of information. Not only does she not know what she's talking about, she's trying to be cute. Here's a huge gap about what it means to be a U.S. citizen on Guam. Now she goes from what it means to be a U.S. citizen on Guam. We became an unincorporated territory of the United States. In fact, Guam didn't have to make us citizens in 1950. They didn't do it for American Samoa, another unincorporated territory. American Samoans still aren't U.S. citizens. They are U.S. national non-citizens. Did you know that U.S. national non-citizen status exists? Yeah, I did. In fact, I knew that before August 1, 1950, the native inhabitants of Guam were U.S. nationals. But I cheat, I read. I try to know what I'm talking about. I have an audience just like you do, Rindrati, and I think I owe it to my audience to do something other than repeat stuff that I might have heard over the clothesline. Guam residents are not eligible for benefits that U.S. citizens in the 50 states have access to, even if we pay into the same systems. Now, here's a really bad one. Pay into the same systems, such as Social Security. Well, it's just dead. F. You get an F on your test, Miss Sellis. People on Guam not only may pay into Social Security, they must. There's a tax called FICA, Federal Income Contributions Act, that you pay, that's deducted from your check if you are a wage earner. If you're self-employed, you pay self-employment tax. And when you reach one of the eligibility levels, you can start drawing a Social Security annuity. And here's the neat thing about it, Rindrati. It doesn't depend on citizenship. It's available to aliens. non-citizens.
Location.
Yeah, it is. So if you happen to be a non-immigrant alien, spell H2, you came over here and there was no treaty between your home country and the United States, your employer would withhold Social Security from your check. He would send it off to Washington, etc. And if you worked the necessary 10 years under Social Security, you would be eligible for an annuity, even though you weren't even a permanent resident. That's the way Social Security works. Now, here's what Rindradi says. Guam residents are not eligible for benefits that U.S. citizens in the 50 states have access to, even if we pay into the same system, such as Social Security. When somebody makes a gigantic boner like this, what happens to credibility? Guam residents have no right to... What happened here? Did this get screwed up here? No right to... Maybe I better borrow your newspaper, Jose. I think some of this got lost in the printing process here. Hang on just a second. I'm trying to read from a printout here, and it doesn't work very well. Okay, thanks, Jose. Yeah. Yeah. Guam residents are not eligible for benefits that U.S. citizens in the 50 states have access to, even if we pay into the same system, such as Social Security. Guam residents have no right to supplemental security income benefits for our disabled for no other reason than we live here. I've explained this one a million times before. The reason that SSI doesn't apply here and in other territories is because we don't pay into the federal treasury. So the Congress, not the insular cases, the Congress has decided that because we don't pay in, we're not eligible for SSI. This is a matter for Congress to cure. Guam and other territories shoulder a cap on Medicaid payments while other jurisdictions do not. Same answer. So if it costs us $100 million to pay Medicaid and our cap is $50 million, each taxpayer on Guam shoulders the additional $50 million while not shouldering federal income tax. No resident of the 50 states have this burden, but they have another burden called federal income tax. People want to leave that other half out. The same applies to earned income tax credits and ultimately, and now let's stop and talk about earned income tax credits. Earned income tax credits are exactly that, a credit against the income tax that a person pays. People with low income and large families get a credit against their tax liability, and that that credit can exceed the amount they paid in, and they therefore get a cash back. That applies in the 50 states. It also applies here because we have the mirror image of the income tax. However, as I've explained before, we don't have to pay the earned income tax credit. We just want to. And thanks to Michael San Nicolas, we're going to be reimbursed the earned income tax credit. You probably didn't know that, though, Rinradi, because probably your major source of news is the Pacific Daily News. So here is the core of why and how we exist as an unincorporated territory. Now, she's going to give us a history lesson here. In 1901, the United States Supreme Court released a series of decisions called the Insular Cases. These decisions dictated how the United States could treat territories it acquired after winning the Spanish-American War. Wrong. You really need to listen to Tall Tales, Rinradi. The insular cases, the one that everybody talks about, Downs versus Bidwell, did not have anything at all to say about the United States could treat territories. It only said that the revenue clauses of the Constitution do not apply in the conquered territories. And she says it talks about it talked about Puerto Rico, you know, the insular. In fact, most of the insular cases dealt with Puerto Rico. One dealt with the Philippines, but mostly they dealt with Puerto Rico. None of them dealt with Guam, even mentioned Guam, or had any application to Guam. The ruling essentially said that full constitutional protection does not apply to all places under American control, even if American citizens live there. That's right. Constitution did not apply ex proprio vicare, except Downs versus Bidwell did make an exception and then said that fundamental rights did apply in the acquired territories. Now, when it comes to fundamental rights, that's a pretty hard one to get your arms around. I've attempted it a couple of times, but it's not an easy one to answer. So she goes on to say, the same Supreme Court that decided in favor of Plessy versus Ferguson. You can't decide in favor of a court. You can say decided in favor of Plessy, or decided in favor of Ferguson, or you can say issued the ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson, but you can't say this is the same Supreme Court that decided in favor of Plessy versus Ferguson, the decision that allowed race-based segregation in 1896. So this is a chestnut that everybody who wants to talk about the insular cases pulls out and throws on the table. That law has been struck down, but the decisions from the insular cases continue to stand strong. And I'm here to tell you, let's hope that that continues for the reasons I've mentioned. She says, I don't remember once being told as a student in a classroom on Guam that I did not have the same constitutional protections as a high school student sitting in a classroom in Seattle. Well, that's because you did. In 1968, Congress amended the Organic Act to allow people on Guam to elect their own governor, and a set of provisions called the Mink Amendment. And the Mink Amendment said the Bill of Rights, to the extent that they hadn't applied, and I'll get into that in a second, applied in Guam, just like they apply in the States. Now, all of the language that you'll find in the Bill of Rights, you know, the no quartering of troops, life, liberty, property, due process of law, all of those things are in the Organic Act as adopted. So, once again, I don't think you were paying attention in school, Rinradi. Maybe that's it. Yeah. She goes on to repeat the Tina myth, or the Ann Paris Hattori myth. The insular cases are built on the belief that residents of the U.S. unincorporated territories were alien races. Well, let's stop and examine that for a second. At the time of the Spanish-American War, people living in the territory and those islands were aliens. But this alien races thing, as I've explained ad nauseum, is not the holding in Downs. It's obiter dictum. It's stated hypothetically, and the essence of it is that if we acquire more territories, here's what we want to keep in mind. But, you know, there's no sense doing your own research and scholarship, Rinradi, when you can just say what everybody else is saying. And she picked up the exact Ann Hattori quote. The insular cases are built on the belief that residents of the U.S. unincorporated territories were alien races who did not understand the concept of freedom in governments and therefore could be treated differently than other U.S. citizens. I got to take a break here. I got to take a deep breath. If nothing else, this is astounding.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, well, not only is it wrong, but it's long. So my suspicion is that the managing editor said, hey, Renrati, can you help us out? We got this gigantic news hole to fill, and we don't have anything to put in there. Can you scribble something out for us? So I took a glance at Facebook here during that last break, and our producer here, Jose Martinez. Jose, do you want to be the host someday?
You're doing a fine job.
Jose comes along and says, tomorrow's PDN headline, Kaleo Moylan quickly asked for a refund of his purchase of the Guam PDN. And Peter J. Santos, it's amazing how much disinformation Neil Weir, the savior of Guam, has spread. And then Peter goes on to say, let me see here, let me look at this. Okay. I'll get this here. It's a little difficult to do this from where I'm looking. And then Peter goes on to point out what the fallacy in this whole Tina Rose Munya Barnes and Parasatori argument is. 1, no more duty-free. 2, no more Section 30 funds. 3, we pay federal income tax. 4, self-determination is dead. 5, all our laws unique to our territories will become illegal per se. In return, we get to vote for president. We already participate in 99% of all federal programs. Us not being in Medicaid and SSA is not a result of the insular cases. Right on, Peter. Right on. But how do we pound this into the heads of people who obviously...
And that didn't take a 2-page spread.
No, it didn't. It didn't. You know, and I'm breaking one of the rules here of political discourse. The rules are that never pick a fight with a man who buys newsprint by the carload and is inked by the barrel. And the second rule is never fight with the media. You get all dirty and the media loves it. But this can't be allowed to go unanswered. I may have to download my nasty letter software and write another letter here. Okay, then Renrati localizes a little bit. She says there is a Chamorro saying, not used much anymore, Sangani Guagwan. It means speak what is valuable. Words matter. I couldn't agree more. The choice of words matters. Alien races is an intentional description that no longer has a place in our country that we call our own.
It's used every single day.
Yeah. Really. The law's reach is so extensive that even relocation can strip you of your constitutional rights. Today, the mere act of moving to Guam wipes away your SSI benefits as well as your right to vote for president. If you move from Nevada and become a resident of the island, you no longer hold the same rights as you previously did in Las Vegas.
Does she not understand? She just gave an argument against her argument.
I think so. The issue of the insular cases is at the forefront because Puerto Rico Representative Raúl Grijalva has introduced a congressional resolution, House Resolution 279 states, to acknowledge that the U.S. Supreme Court's decisions in the insular cases are contrary to the text and history of the Constitution, rest on racial views and stereotypes from the era of Plessy versus Ferguson that have long been rejected and should be rejected as having no place in United States constitutional law. Leave it to Raúl. Essentially, the resolution is demanding that the insular cases decisions be consciously rejected by Congress. Okay, Raúl, so I introduced the legislation that takes away the Medicaid cap, and calls for SSI eligibility here in Guam. That would be a small step. You could do that. It remains to be, what will this do for our future? Well, I hope nothing, because it's stupid. What will it do for our future? It remains to be seen, but every step forward is a good step. It will be interesting to see how this resolution is ultimately treated in Congress. They haven't had a good laugh for quite a while, so I have my own prediction. Will Guam again be slapped in the face? And if we are, what will we do? How about a little demagoguery? Maybe that would work for us, right? There is a fear that if this issue remains unresolved in this generation, the issue of our status as a territory of the United States will disappear. There is fear if this issue remains unresolved in this generation, the issue of our status as a territory will disappear because we are comfortable in our Western trappings. A fear that our younger generations won't understand the importance of fighting for the right to be treated the same as any other citizen of the United States will full protection of the United States Constitution, especially that protection called the United States income tax. I'll tell you, we owe it to the younger generation. In fact, we should go out to all of the schools and say, kids, we're working really hard so that when you grow up, you'll be able to pay federal income tax. Forget about this mirror image territorial income tax. Now, of course, the government of Guam, as you know it, will cease to exist because we won't be able to afford it. But that's all right. I also don't want to hedge my bets on hope. Our younger generation needs to learn, understand, discuss, debate, engage in the realities of our existence as an unincorporated territory. Let's go back to a real Sunday forum then, Rendrati, instead of a Sunday forum that's couched in such a manner that anyone who could read will know what the right answer is. Our social studies classes can't stop when Guamanians became U.S. citizens as if that magically solved everything. I understand that there is comfort in what you know. Yeah, like It's much easier to believe the lie you've heard 1,000 times than the truth, than the fact that you've never been exposed to. That's very true. I understand, as you were, if we are enjoying those trappings in a gilded cage, a cage is still a cage, no matter how pretty and how comfortable it may seem. Wow.
Especially when you construct it yourself.
Yeah. Wow. This is really something. From the publisher of the Daily News. So that really tells you everything you need to know about the Daily News, doesn't it? Yeah. I sent in a letter on the Jose? I sent in a letter on the Resolution 56 issue that covers an awful lot of this stuff, because that's what Resolution 56 covers. And I hope the Daily News will publish it. Well, they have a policy that, they only want one of your letters a month. And I already sent one in last week, so I don't know where it's going to go. But I really need to send a letter to Rin Ratty to tell her she really needs to bone up if she's going to write stuff in the newspaper. Okay, going from there to the Post. And the Post gets it close to right. They missed it. They missed a little bit of it, but maybe I ought to stop and see who I've got here in the green room. Maybe somebody wants to. Maybe it's Rin Ratty, right? Okay, it's another Joe. All right, another Joe. I'll get to you after I do the Post editorial. Here's what the Post says. It's great that Senators Adelup are working together. No, it's not great. Please share the plan with the public. And here's a quote. It's an awakening for me. This is how we should be working together. That's how Lulian Guerrero described a meeting held with 14 senators on Tuesday to discuss priorities for spending roughly $600 million in federal aid anticipated for Guam. At least $553 million is expected to be received in the next few days. Well, this is all wrong. What is this? A kind of make tall tales even harder than it normally is? The branches, and then the editorial goes on to say the branches should always be working together. No, the branches should not always be working together. The very construction of a tripartite government, a three-branch government, is that there has to be tension among the branches. That's the idea. You guys that have never seen the inside of a wind-up clock don't understand the concept of checks and balances. And it's unfortunate, but if you were to look inside a wind-up clock, you'd see a big spring that causes stuff to go and a balance wheel that swings back and forth. And then you'd see that balance wheel propels a lot of gears that are interconnected. And because there are checks on the gears, that is, there's a little lever that drops down between the teeth of the gears to keep a gear from advancing too fast and to make sure that it goes the right direction. That's checks and balances. And that was the idea behind the United States Constitution, a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. The tension among the branches is the essential part of the design. The last thing you want is for them to be working together. This three-branch government was designed to make sure that not too much power got concentrated in the hands of too few people in order to protect the people that the government is supposed to serve. The Post said the branches should always be working together. But now, more than ever, consider we have thousands of people still relying on unemployment assistance. No. And we'll see the impact of that in coming months, not just in people seeking help from welfare programs, but also with dropping tax collections and government revenues. Senators, for the most part, agreed with the governor that the meeting went well, and they all agreed on the spending priorities for the federal funds. It's not a good sign. Of course, it would be nice if taxpayers also had an idea what the final plan is before the governments begin spending. Throughout this pandemic, the public has been left waiting to know when clinics would be held, how to apply for benefits, who's eligible for health services or direct aid. As such, we agree with Senator Joanne Brown's protest that the meeting should have been held publicly. Absolutely. This way, everyone whose lives are impacted by the decisions that we may have agreed upon in that meeting know what those decisions are. Quote, the legislature should never meet, deliberate, or decide public business in secret. It's when these types of secret meetings are held, corruption thrives. I will not condone such activities by attending them, Brown said. 1 out of 15. And Republicans, you are not acting like, I said it yesterday. I'm not surprised when Democrats do this because, they've just kind of put out in the open what they've been doing all along anyhow. They've just been an extension of the executive office since they were sworn in doing the governor's bidding. But now we come right out and do it in public. So come on in, you guys. Somebody locks the door. We got to decide what we're going to do with the public's money. Senators who attended the meeting said a detailed proposal similar to what the administration submitted last year for coronavirus funds is expected to be submitted by the legislature. The governor said she was putting one of her best people, Red Flag Carlotta, in charge of writing the proposal. The governor went on to explain it may take a little while because Red Flag Carlotta will have to coordinate with Randy Sablon over at JRM. There's no clear date on when that plan will be submitted, and it would be helpful if the legislature received it in time to discuss out in the open the budgets for various agencies in the upcoming fiscal year, which starts October 1, 4 short months from now. Senator Joe San Augustine, who chairs the Legislative Committee on Appropriations, expected to start budget hearings next week, provided that locks can be installed on the doors of the legislative chamber. Sometimes these hearings are thought of as boring bureaucracy, but with Wuhan virus still ravaging our pocketbooks, public school parents need to know how much to save for basic school supplies. Businesses need to know what fees will be waived, delayed, or raised. Our neighbors who are still unemployed need to know what help the government will offer. So yes, while we all celebrate with the governor and senators that they're working together, no, we're not all celebrating here. We would like to add that the island's residents also have a right to know what discussions are being held and how they're planning to spend federal money provided to benefit the entire community. Open meetings are one way to accomplish that. Post, this is a little bit like that old joke about Abraham Lincoln's assassination, as though it's okay to make jokes about subjects like that. But I think we're all familiar with how where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He was assassinated in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. If you go to Washington today, you can still go to Ford's Theater. I hope you have better seats than Abraham had. But he was sitting in a balcony seat in Ford's Theater watching a play called Our American Cousins, right? And John Wilkes Booth snuck up behind him and shot him in the head, and he died, right? So the old saw is this: a newspaper reporter, probably from the predecessor of the Daily News, interviewed Mrs. Lincoln, and the interviewer said, Mrs. Lincoln, other than that, what did you think of the play? And that's kind of it's kind of this editorial here. Well, yeah, they were working together, and they never mentioned closed door meeting.
It's like, wouldn't it be nice if it was an open door meeting, as an aside?
Yeah. So to me, the real story is that they think they can meet in private, in secret, and arrive at secret decisions. And we only find out what they decided if somebody wants to tell us. And we're not sure if we're getting the right information. We get different kinds of information from different people. It's just not a way, the old saying used to be, it's just not the way to run a railroad. It's just not a way, it's just not a way to run a government, for sure. Okay, I got a short break coming up, and then I've got another Joe and someone who was just designated yesterday as our Greg.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere, on your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, here we go again. Interesting post here from our ever-loving producer. Jose calls me out and said, Bob is wrong. The budget hearings won't be behind closed locked doors. They'll be held in Iran. And I'm going to ask Jose to explain that a little bit. Would you go ahead, Jose?
There's supposedly, I've heard, a super secret meeting place in Iran.
Yeah, that's what Lou said when she was rebutting or answering Joanne Brown. She said, this was just to stir things up. If I were going to hold a secret meeting, I'd do it at our beach in Iran. So all you news turkeys out there, you better stake out Leon Guerrero's beach in Iran, because some nefarious activity may be occurring there. Okay, I've got another Joe, I've got our Greg, and I've got the most dangerous man in the room between now and the halftime. If I can't get to you before halftime, we'll get you afterwards. Go ahead, another Joe.
Hey, Bob, you're right. Words matter, and so did someone who wrote that also. And this carries on even from yesterday, because they keep mixing up the issues. I don't know. I don't think they're all on the same page. I think we have these multiple woke groups of white man's bad. Basically, they're using, well, you want to decolonize, but you keep calling this Micronesia. Well, last time I checked, Robert Underwood said that Chamorros migrated from Asia, from two places, from Indonesia and from through the Philippines, Taiwan, and through the northern Philippines. So last time I checked, that's Asia. So what's all this talk about micro? That's a colonial term, I think. Uncle Bob, what do you think? Does that sound right or what?
Yeah, well, you know, everybody wants to make a lot out of this, the word indigenous. And I'm never quite sure what to make of it. I think I'm frozen. I have a frozen evaluation going back to reading National Geographic when I was a kid, when tribes would be discovered in the jungles of Borneo or maybe the Philippines or someplace. They were actually made contact with people who had never seen Westerners before. And they made, they made a big show out of this, indigenous people. But I don't see being indigenous to anywhere is a badge that gives you some kind of special privileges. If you look at it, the history of the world, of progress in the world, has been migration. Agriculture was invented in the Fertile Crescent when people figured out how to turn grass into wheat, how to herd animals, etc. And that agriculture was the beginning of human civilization, and it spread from the Fertile Crescent around the world into Europe, etc. There were all kinds of migrations, and there was a migration that brought the people here. According to those who want to sing this song, 3,500 years ago. So I just don't see the importance of dwelling on the fact that some of us here are indigenous, and I suppose everybody, if you go back far enough, was indigenous to somewhere, right? Actually, the anthropologists say we all came from Africa. Yeah. So,
yep.
Yeah, words do matter, another Joe.
It's really, like I said, Uncle Bob, the only thing that makes sense is the majority perspective is the white people are bad and everyone else is woke. Everyone else is a victim, and so you have to be woke. If you're not woke, you're bad. You're racist. Even people who are not in line. Biden said, "Oh, if you don't vote for me, you're not black."
Yeah.
So you have to. The people are. I don't know if it's being shamed or being intimidated or being brainwashed or a little bit of all that, but it's just really strange. False logic. It's not. There's no fact checking, and.
Well, I've explained this on Tall Tales. It all goes back to the 1920s and a group of guys called the Frankfurt School who were Marxists. And they decided the traditional Marxist class warfare didn't work when they watched what happened in World War I, and German workers were quite adept at killing French workers and vice versa. So they came up with a new approach, infiltrating the institutions, and this progressed. A guy named Antonio Gramsci is the one who actually invented identity politics, and that's where we are now. And it's been successful beyond Gramsci and the Frankfurt School's wildest dreams. They've taken over huge parts of our government, the universities, newspapers, etc., and convinced everybody that there are oppressors and oppressed, and you're either one or the other. And you can tell the difference because the oppressors are white, the oppressed are not white. If you're white, it helps if you're woke and what they call an ally, but it doesn't really change anything. You're still an oppressor. You're still a bad person. You were born bad. Right, another Joe?
I think that argument is you can only take it so far, and it gets to be ridiculous.
Well, and it's always advanced in the face of racism. Racism is a bad thing. So here's how you must think about racism. You must be a racist if you're really going to have anything to do with racism, right?
Yeah. Hey, Uncle Bob, thanks for your time. I just wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow is a public hearing for tele-abortion. Anyone's interested, anti-abortion people interested, starting 9 a.m. tomorrow at the legislature, Bill 103-36. Thank you very much, Uncle Bob. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the reminder, another Joe. Okay, we're just about up to the halftime show, right? So Our Greg and our Carl will get to you right after the show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Gas back in the pipeline. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Colonial Pipeline says its line that provides fuel to 19 states has been restarted and went down late last week after a ransomware attack. That shutdown triggering panic buying, gas shortages, and higher prices.
California is at $4.11 a gallon on average. In Illinois, it's $3.23. That's the highest since 2014. Virginia, $2.87 a gallon, and North Carolina at $2.85. In North Carolina, 70% of gas stations are out of fuel altogether. In Virginia, it's more than 50% of stations, and in Georgia and South Carolina, it's almost 50%.
Fox's Trace Gallagher, it will take days for the pipeline's operation to return to normal. President Biden has issued executive orders to all federal departments and government software contractors to strengthen cyber defenses against hacking attacks. Rocket attacks continue on Israel, launched by Hamas from the Gaza Strip. Israel continuing its military response.
The Israeli Security Cabinet has voted to move forward with more severe strikes against Hamas, the group in control of Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu preparing for days of fighting against Hamas, a group who says they are not interested in a ceasefire.
Fox's Trey Yingst in Israel. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, urging de-escalation and an end to the rocket attacks. The Centers for Disease Control adding its approval to giving the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine to children as young as 12. Shots will be available to them as early as today. Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine congratulating his state's residents.
You've followed the protocols. You've done what we've asked you to do. You've bravely fought this virus.
He'll drop statewide restrictions starting on June 2nd. America is listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Tempers flaring yesterday during a congressional hearing over the January Capitol Hill riot.
Two senior members of the Trump administration are defending decisions made as protests turned violent and breached the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
You were AWOL. You were AWOL, Mr. Secretary. You were AWOL. Remember, as you said before,
that's completely inaccurate.
Former Acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller says there were 8,000 law enforcement officers at the Capitol, but it became clear in the afternoon local and federal law enforcement were insufficient. Miller and former Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen also say they did not speak with then President Trump on the 6th, but had all the authorities they needed. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Congressional Republicans have voted to toss Congresswoman Liz Cheney from their leadership team over her break with former President Trump. Cheney saying after the vote,
the nation needs a strong Republican Party. The nation needs a party that is based upon fundamental principles of conservatism. And I am committed and dedicated to ensuring that that's how this party goes forward, and I plan to lead the fight to do that.
charges are being filed against members of a Colorado cult.
7 members of the so-called Love Has Won cult have been slapped with charges ranging from child abuse to tampering with a corpse. This after they built an apparent shrine around the mummified remains of their late leader, Amy Carlson, who goes by the name Mother God. Her body was found in a southern Colorado home. She was covered with Christmas lights and glitter. The coroner's office has not said how the 45-year-old died. The 7 defendants made their first court appearance Wednesday. Tom Graham, Fox News.
Wisconsin's Court of Appeals has thrown out part of a woman's shoplifting sentence that required Markia Brown to tell any store she entered that she was on supervision for shoplifting. The appeals court saying it doesn't think that embarrassment promotes rehabilitation. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Busy week? Mescla Bistro and Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Another great halftime show here on Tall Tales, and we are now, excuse me, in the second half of Tall Tales. I'm going to start out the second half with our Greg. It looked like the most dangerous man in the room was probably called out on some kind of secret mission, some locked door meeting or something like that. But he,
down south.
Yeah, if he calls back, we'll get him on the air. Before I pick up on our Greg, I do want to read a letter, an email that I got. It's a good email, but to add to its importance, I'm going to tell you that it's anonymous. We all know that an anonymous letter is much more important than one that's right. And this is how it goes. Bob, for some weird reason, I've been on Facebook for a few years, and it never occurred to me to go to the Point Facebook page and click on, quote, invite your friends to like the Point. A list of my friends popped up, and I just clicked on whoever I wanted to invite out of my list of 900 plus friends. I did so today and invited 199 of my Facebook friends who are politically incorrect and might enjoy the points lineup, especially Tall Tales and Ratio. I'm getting feedback that several have accepted. I also posted this wording in a post on my to my page. Quote, if you're on island or off and have an interest in local events, there's no better way to get a feel for the pulse of our local politics and government and a local take on events in the states. I'm especially partial to Senator Bob Klitzkie's feisty daily talk show, Monday to Friday, 4 to 6. He and producer Jose Martinez offer a good mix of salty commentary on local and national politics and government, including interesting history, local and federal law. Bob was a lawyer by trade until he retired, and a steady dash of sarcastic tongue-in-cheek humor. Yeah. Each segment is like a college class, only much more interesting and funny. Okay, so it's not like a college class. For you weirdo morning people, Ray Gibson has an excellent, lively, and live talk show from 6 a.m. to 10. Equally spicy and salty commentary on local and national politics. If you're not listening daily to Tall Tales and or the Ray Gibson Show, you don't know what you're missing out on. Good letter.
I concur.
Yeah. Evidence Anonymous.
I'm glad he called the morning crew weirdos. We're the straight shooters.
Good call. Yeah. Good call. Yeah. Okay, let's tune in on R. Greg. Good afternoon, R. Greg.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
Doing great, Greg.
That's a great letter. You got to put that in your archive.
I should do that. Yeah.
Hey, listen. My separation of state. If the legislators and the governor want to get together, and I heard you talking yesterday, and yeah, they probably didn't do it right, but that's not a violation of separation of state. If they dealt with the courts, that would be a separation. That would be a very, in my opinion, problem. They should have been open. It should have been public. Just like you said yesterday.
Yep.
But I don't think that the legislature talking with the governor and trying to agree on where the money goes is not a bad thing, but we need to know where it's going, like you said yesterday.
Yeah. Well, just let me repeat what I said yesterday, Greg. There is a legal way of doing this. What they did yesterday was illegal to start with. And that's this. They invite the governor to come to the legislature. They go into session. They give the governor the privilege of the floor, which means they allow her to walk in during session, which is not an unusual thing. And then they resolve into a committee of the whole. And during a committee of the whole, people who are not senators can grab a microphone and they can speak. And she could have said everything she needed to say. She could have had a dialogue with one or more senators, and they could have done exactly what we think they may have done behind closed doors. We would have known what was going on. They wouldn't have broken the law, and they would have set a good example for the rest of the government that they understand the open government law and they're willing to comply with it. What they did yesterday, we're talking about separation of the branches. And I hear what you're saying, but when the legislature meets, it can only meet as a legislature. It can't meet as, a bowling club, a bowling team, and enter into a tournament with the governor in order to come up with public policy. So they literally, the law prohibits them from doing what they did. And
yes, sir, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But hey, thanks for bringing all that out.
Yeah, well, I see it as my job, especially were you listening for this piece from the Daily News, from the publisher of the Daily News?
Yeah.
You know, if the publisher of one of our dailies doesn't know what's going on, we are in bad shape.
Politics.
Yeah.
I hate politics.
Okay.
But let's just do what's right.
We'll do what's right, Greg, and thanks again for calling. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, sir.
So long. And I suppose this is the most dangerous man in the room. Yeah, the most dangerous man in the room. The most dangerous man in the room obviously was able to quickly dispatch his secret mission and is now available. He can't tell us what he did, but he can tell us a lot of other things. So go for it, Carl.
Well, you gave me some spare time, so I had time enough to overthrow a foreign government. And now I'm back.
All right.
By the way, that was a nice letter. I like how that guy thinks.
Yeah, he was right on point, wasn't he?
He was right on right on point. I just wanted to ask you a question, Bob, regarding this proposal to build a brand spanking new hospital with money that I believe was really meant to help us get back on our feet. Now, our elected officials, the governor and legislators, actually did tremendous damage to the private sector, especially small business employees, while protecting the government sector and making sure they didn't miss a check. So I'm thinking that money should be used somehow to help out the private sector, small business especially, get back on its feet, because it is suffering tremendously. And as you said, it's not clear if the hotels will ever come back, in any form close to what they were before. We shall see. But I'm wondering where you stand on that, Bob, the spending of this money. Do you agree with building a brand spanking new hospital? Do you think we should use that to refurbish the hospital, section by section? And, it's like we have, what's the saying, a champagne taste on a beer budget. And suddenly we find, we've got extra money and we're just pouring gasoline all over it, and we're just getting ready to burn through more money, and we're deeply in debt as it is already.
Well,
so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
As usual, Carl, I have a really good answer on that. The governor said when she was talking with a reporter about what the rules would be for spending that money, and she said, well, it's I understand it can be spent on anything that was affected by the pandemic. And what was more affected by the pandemic than the hospital? And my answer to that is no. The hospital wasn't affected at all. The hospital operated as a hospital like it did before the pandemic. That's what hospitals do. So to say that the hospital was affected is just wrong. Now, do we need a new hospital? Yeah, we need a new hospital. This one, I think, is like 42 years old, and we do such a poor job. The hospital where I was born over 80 years ago is still standing and still being used back in Wisconsin. But they cheat. They maintain buildings back there. It's not fair. So we do need a hospital. But I don't I don't understand the wisdom of tying up $300 million for that hospital, because obviously we're going to finance it. You're not going to come in and say, we want a new hospital and we're going to pay cash for it. That just isn't the way public improvements are constructed. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to float a bond to build a hospital. It'll be a revenue bond. And for cash, for debt service, we're going to have the money that Michael St. Nicholas is going to get has got for us as a reimbursement for the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's something like $33 million a year. That would be the money to use in financing the new hospital. But don't tie up $300 million like Lou wants to do. So that's addressing the matter of the hospital. The second matter is the matter that you raise is, if we have all of this money, who do we make whole out of it? And for the governor, the answer is clear. She wants to make government employees whole. She wants to pay out the RISE Act, but she wants to use some of that $600 million to pay government employees the same amount that's going to be paid out in the RISE Act. Because, the pandemic affected them too. Some of them, people got sick and stuff like that. It's just, I'm sometimes at a loss for words at the way that mind functions. The government employees didn't lose a nickel. Some government employees actually made more money than they do during ordinary times. And she wants to take some of that windfall money and give it to them in the name of, quote, fairness. So, yeah, I agree. We've got an economic development authority. I think our legislature should design programs, low-cost loans and grants to businesses that were really hurt by the lockout, and that's exactly what it was. Not so much from a standpoint of charity, but from the standpoint of trying to get the economy back up and moving again. From the standpoint of, the guys like Tom Pinoff, who invested a lot of money in what should be resort facilities, and then the governor comes along and says, no, bars can't open. So I'm with you on that. That's what the money should be used for. It should be used to make those who suffered, those businesses that got really clobbered by the lockout, make them whole and not pour it into that hospital. That's the good answer, Carl.
Yeah, I agree, and I think she pictures government employees as her base, and she wants to protect that base. And, as Thomas Sowell said, the primary objective for politicians isn't to solve our problems, it's to solve their problems. And their number one problem is getting reelected. Everything else is a distant second and third and so on. So exactly. I completely agree. So you don't think the idea of refurbishing the hospital is a doable idea, or you're not for that?
Well, the Army Corps of Engineers said it would cost $790 million to bring it up to standard, which is about what a new hospital would cost. So, and then of course, when you're working, we're going to have to keep using the current hospital until we get a new one built. If you're improving it, that makes it really difficult to operate out of. So. Yeah,
they need to do some juggling.
Yeah.
But there are those towers next door. Maybe you could rent some space there. I don't know if those are even open, if there are people in them. Those 4 towers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. I lost track of that, Carl. I'll circle back on that.
I was just curious what your common sense take was on that, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, Carl. Good talking to you. So, yeah, a hospital, and of course this train has left the station already, but we gave a GURA qualifying certificate to GRMC after they are already up and running. A waste of money. And my idea was that we should have said, if you want a qualifying certificate, you set yourself up to cater to medical tourism, and then we'll give it to you. You build a bigger hospital, and you attempt to attract people from the Philippines and other foreign countries because you're practicing top-notch American medicine in your hospital. But once again, that didn't happen. So we should have a quality hospital. We should have quality schools. And if we did, we could sell ourselves as America and Asia, and we could say to American companies, if you want to set up a shop out here in this part of the world, come to Guam, where your kids can go to American-style schools, where you'll have American medical service available to you, and where you're going to have McDonald's and Burger King. But we can't do that. You know, we have to short ourselves on the things we really need, our hospital and our schools. All right, so much for that. Let's get into the card. And this is what I've got on the card. I've got the Vigilance Committee versus the 36th Guam Legislature. I need to at least remind you again of Red Flag Carlotta versus the Sunshine Law. And then we've got Grijalvo versus Guam. Grijalvo is holding that hearing in Washington. Bavacqua versus the CNMI, where Bavacqua is basically, in so many words, told the CNMI folks, you're dumb, even though there are Chamorros there. And then a couple of holdovers from the last card. So picking up with the Vigilance Committee versus the 36th, this is a story that ran in the Post. Secret meeting prompts demand for records. A closed-door meeting between the governor and senators has gotten attention of a group that advocates for transparency in government. The Vigilance Committee has sent a demand for public records to Speaker Therese Terlahi, seeking copies of any public notices for the interbranch discussion on plans to spend more than $600 million for an upcoming federal bailout, and any minutes from the meeting. The committee is a nonprofit organization that is, quote, dedicated to requiring compliance with the Open Government Law and the Sunshine Reform Act. The public and the media were not allowed to observe or record the dialogue between lawmakers and Governor Leon Guerrero. Reporters were able to speak with senators and the governor after the meeting. Oh, how wonderful. You'd have thought that the governor would have had police officers there saying, you can't talk to these people just because the meeting is over. How dare you, Jose? Yeah. Senator Joanne Brown was the lone member of the 36th Guam legislature to not attend, a decision she made out of protest to the conference being held in secret. With the exception of the legislative caucuses, everything that the legislature does should be held in public, Brown said. The legislature should never meet, deliberate, or decide public business in secret. It's when these types of secret meetings are held, corruption thrives. I will not condone such activities by attending them. Good for Brown, and maybe you could talk some sense to the other 6 Republicans, Senator Brown. She added, this is simply not a, quote, legislative caucus meeting, nor is it a chance meeting. It's a planned meeting to discuss and deliberate on spending of the American Rescue Plan funds. The people of Guam should have access to these discussions so that everyone is aware of how these monies will be spent. The governor said on Tuesday that she, quote, totally disagrees, not disagrees or kind of disagrees, totally disagrees.
That's how they talk at the beach house.
Yeah, with Senator Brown. It was not a secret meeting. We sent out the letters. Did you get a letter, Jose?
I did not.
I didn't get one. We invited the media. Oh, really? Yeah, we invited the media to come and stand by the locked door. The media knew about it. We're now giving you information that we discussed there. We're giving you you don't deserve it. We're giving it to you. If she was there, she would have appreciated the cooperation and the unification attitude of our public officials. And here's your line, Jose. If it was a secret, I'd hold it down in my Inarajan beach. But it's not. Leon Guerrero's beach.
That's her secret spot.
In response to the Vigilance Committee's letter, Speaker Therese Tlahi said her office will provide any and all documents in our possession relative to the inquiry. Now, as I mentioned before, and this is a little complicated because it's legal, but they're in a box. So let's get out our Law and Order notebook, so say. Here's what the open government law said. Every meeting of a public agency shall be open to the public, and any person shall be permitted to attend any public agency meeting, except as provided in this chapter. A member of the public shall not be required as a condition to attendance at a meeting of a public agency to register his name and other information, to complete a questionnaire, or otherwise fulfill any condition preceding to his attendance. Every meeting is public, right? That's 8103. 8104A3, the legislature is a public agency when it's holding a daily session, but meetings of political caucuses composed of members of the legislature are not required to be conducted in public. Okay, so every session of the legislature is a public meeting, and everybody gets to go. All right, I'm going to go to take the seventh inning stretch, and then I'll come back to the legislature.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
All dads should own a Traeger, and this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Okay, so here we are, seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field in Chicago. And I don't have time to watch the ball game because I'm too busy here with the legislature and their secret meetings. So I've laid out for you that the law says that every meeting of a public agency shall be open to the public and anybody can attend. Now, the only public meetings that the legislature has, basically, are sessions. That's how the legislature meets. And 8104A3 says the legislature is a public agency when it's holding a daily session. So in order to hold a session, they've got to give notice. They've got to have an agenda. They got to keep minutes, which the law calls a journal. They got to do all those things. I think probably they wouldn't have to meet in the session hall if there were some reason for them to meet somewhere else. There's nothing in the Organic Act telling them that they must meet in the session hall, so they could probably meet in the big conference room at the governor's office, but they got to let everybody in. Now, if it's a session, they're wrong. They violated the open government law because they didn't go through all the formalities. And if it's not a session, then they're wrong because the second sentence of Section 8105 reads like this. No chance meeting, informal assemblage, or electronic communication shall be used to decide, and then here's the key word, or deliberate public business. Now, we know they deliberated public business because, as Lou said, when they came out, they could talk to reporters. And the people who were in the secret meeting said they would could discuss that they had discussed the public business. Okay, so no chance meeting shall be used, no chance meeting or informal assemblage, etc., should be used to deliberate public business in contravention of the spirit or requirements of this chapter. And the spirit of this chapter, the legislature declares it is the policy of this territory that the formation of public policy and decisions is public and shall not be conducted in secret. This is the word secret, Lou. So the fact that people knew about the meeting doesn't mean that it's not secret. You conducted your business in secret. The people of Guam do not yield their individual rights to the public agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know, even the legislature. The people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they have created. So to me, it's a frying pan fire. If they say, well, no, this wasn't a chance meeting. This wasn't an illicit meeting. This was a session. Well, you didn't comply with the requirements. Or, oh, this wasn't a session. This was just a meeting. Yeah, did you discuss public business? Well, yeah, you know. Well, so this is not on the governor. This is on the legislature. They didn't have to go. Senator Brown was the only one who had her brain housing group turned on and said, no, I'm not going to go to this. The rest, you know, I guess you were just so overwhelmed, you know, kind of like, sort of like the president is coming to town and he wants to talk to me. I'm just so overwhelmed. You know, I'm just so thrilled that the governor's actually going to talk to us. That, you know, it's something we don't do. Or yeah, of course I'm going to go. I want to tell the governor what I want to do with that money. Well, is it legal? Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it's legal or not. Is it right? Gosh. But the governor wants to talk to us down at her office.
Was it $500 per person?
Yeah. Yeah, it was broken up into 3 groups. Each group had to pay $500 to get in. And I remember Chris Duenas, the minority leader on Tall Tales, with his confession saying, when he was part of the WANPAT 10, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. But by gosh, I learned something. I learned something I'm never going to do. His paraphrasing here is keep the people out. And it's exactly what he did here. Chris, you got some splaining to do about this whole secret meeting thing. If the governor really wanted to talk to you, as I explained a few minutes ago, session, invite, committee of the whole, privilege of the floor, you could have done it in front of the cameras and everybody. But of course, the suspicion is this. If everyone were watching, people wouldn't be able to speak as frankly as what they really wanted. They couldn't say what they really wanted to say, which is exactly why it shouldn't be done in secret.
But you got to give it to the Senate because, you know, there's a lot of junior... No, wait, there aren't any junior senators. Well, there's some first-term... No, there's no first-term senators either. Yeah. Though the Republicans are new because, no, they're all former senators, too.
They're all recycled.
There's no excuse.
No excuse whatsoever. And I'm going to say it again. and I'll probably keep saying it. I'm not surprised at the Democrats because they've been in her pocket since they were sworn in. You know, whether they met behind closed doors or not really didn't make much difference. They're just being a little bit more upfront about it now. But Republicans, you guys are supposed to be the opposition party. You know, in the way they talk about it in England, the loyal opposition. You're supposed to be making sure that what the governor and the Democrats do is in service of the people, not in service of themselves. But when you go into those closed-door meetings, you lose, you know, that aura of righteousness, and you're just like the rest of them. Just like the rest of them. Bad, bad show. And one that will not be forgotten come next election time. Okay. And once again, 3 chairs for the Vigilance Committee. The Vigilance Committee is the kind of the thin blue line here that's keeping all of this stuff, at least trying to keep all of this stuff above board. All right. Carlotta, red flag Carlotta. I spoke about this yesterday. Just a short review of the high points. Burial at Camp Blas last November. Burial held in secret. No one knew about it. The cultural warriors and the separatists get their skivvies all bunched up. We want to know anytime there are burial of remains or historical artifacts are discovered, we got to know about it. You know, otherwise we aren't going to be able to bitch about that machine gun range. We have to know about it. But it was later on discovered, and then Carlotta, who is the acting SHPO, State Historical Preservation Officer, who's supposed to be to the military what the Republicans are to the Democrats. Supposed to be keeping the military honest and all of this stuff, being the opposing force that represents local interests, such as those advanced by Protehe and Michael Bavacqua and some of the others of that particular ilk. That's what they're supposed to do. So Carlotta says, I can't give you the information that you need, Anamita Carr, reporter for the Daily News, and then comes up with a cite to a federal statute, just like any lawyer would do, right? 38 USC, something like that. And I thought, wow, Carlotta's really got a handle on the law, right? And Anamita reported in the same story that military authorities said that your questions are a matter for local authorities. So local authorities cite federal law and say we can't do it. A battle of sunshine law requests to Carlotta, which she basically stiffs. And then finally, a sunshine law request goes to Patrick Lujan, who is the SHPO, who's now back on duty. He sends an email chain, and in that email chain is the advice that Randall Sablon of GRMC was given to Carlotta as how to handle the Daily News' request. He says, as a practical matter, don't do it. As a practical, not legal matter, don't do it. Don't let them pull you around. It's a waste of time. Let them do their own legal research. So Carlotta, you know, when Carlotta has to deal with the local media on this matter that a lot of folks, local folks, think are really important, what does she do? Randall, can you whisper in my ear? Can you tell me what to do? And then Anamita writes an article saying, yeah, there were a lot of emails back and forth between the two of them. So, you know, what is really being, what we've really found out here is that Randall Sablon from GRMC, from Joint Region Marianas, is playing Carlotta Leon Guerrero like a cheap violin. And she's being righteous about it, right? until it all comes apart. Anamita discovers this. Now, Anamita has consistently been pro-separatist, pro-environmental wacko, pro-culture warrior, everything that she writes. This story is no exception. So she goes out and interviews a few separatists and makes a story about that. She catches Carlotta with a smoking gun in her hand, and she turns it into an anti-gun story. It's just amazing. But, of course, we can expect the publisher of the Daily News to really square her away, Rend Raddy's Hellas, as soon as she gets done with the Ensler cases. Wow. All right, next item on the card, Tina versus the truth, a never-ending battle. Vice Speaker testifies before Congress on Ensler cases and parity for Guam. Now, that headline is actually correct because she did testify on parity for Guam, which has nothing to do with the Ensler cases. Now, this is a release. You get to the end and you say, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes release. So this is a press release from Tina. This is not what the reporter wrote, what Tina wrote. On Thursday morning, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes testified in support of the United States House of Representatives Resolution 279, which calls for the rejection of the Ensler cases that allowed the United States government to extend unilateral power over unincorporated territories. The Ensler cases are based on a history of racial discrimination. So she starts right out with a big lie, which established a doctrine of separate and unequal for American citizens and nationals living in U.S. territories. We must acknowledge the inequities territories face in federal programs. So she leaves the Ensler cases and goes to inequities territories face in federal programs, such as Medicaid and SSI, creatures of Congress. In testifying in support of House Resolution 279, I stand with my fellow citizens in Guam and in our sister territories in calling on Guam to finally address the injustices of the past. House Resolution 279, her press release says 270. She even got that wrong. It's 279, not 270, Tina. Authored by House Natural Resources Chairman Raul Grijalva, Democrat of Arizona, recognizes and acknowledges that America's constitutional and democratic principles apply throughout the United States, including both states and territories, acknowledges that the Ensler cases are relics of the racial views of an earlier era that have no place in our nation today, and rejects the Ensler cases and their application to all present and future cases and controversies involving the application of the Constitution in the United States territories. The Ensler cases have systematically prevented residents from availing of vital programs such as supplemental security income, additional funding for programs such as Medicaid and federal highway funds. Wrong. It's not the Ensler cases. It's the Congress. So, Tina, when you were looking at Raul Grijalva, you should have said, would you please introduce a bill that provides supplemental security income for Guam, no Medicaid cap for Guam, and more federal highway funds for Guam? Because you can do that. You can't do anything about Downs versus Bidwell because fortunately you're in Congress and not on the Supreme Court. What a nightmare that would be. So that's Tina versus the truth. Okay, I'm going to head for Churchill Downs here in the home stretch. And who else but Drive-Through Jack?
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. We are now heading down the home stretch at Tall Tales for another day. And heading down the home stretch, I'm going to drive past McDonald's, hoping to find a regular caller in there ordering up his supper, none other than the famous drive-through Jack. Hi, Jack.
Good afternoon, Bob.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm going to go through the drive-thru pretty soon, but I can guarantee you that Downs versus Bidwell isn't on the menu.
And if it were, they wouldn't understand it anyhow.
And you probably would have to pay it in native money, which is similar to the Yappies coin. What is it called? The rye?
The big stone. The big stones, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I just want to just a short comment about the Downs versus Bidwell and insular case. Yeah, I misspoke the other day when I said that benign neglect was in there. It was benign sovereignty. I guess it's just been such a long time that I was just trying to pull it out as I was driving.
Okay.
But I just want to reply to all these politicians and all these people pushing about the insufferable insular cases. It isn't the insular cases that is the reason that gas is at $5 a gallon almost. It isn't it's because of insular cases that our hospital is in such a sham. It isn't because of insular cases that our schools in such a disarray. It isn't because of the insular cases that our infrastructures are in constant deteriorating constantly. This is all self-inflicted stuff. This is all self-inflicted. Like you said, we had self-government for almost half a century, over half a century.
70 years, Jack.
Yes, 70 years and counting. 70 years and counting. And a lot of these complaints, a lot of the things that are happening in right now has nothing to do with the insular cases. And, if you're right, it is benign neglect when it comes to the federal government, when it's out here, when they deal with issues out here in the territory, and most of the time it's answered by just throwing money at it. And the sad part is that now they're talking about putting this what's supposed to be a pandemic relief to rebuilding a new hospital is such a sham. It's such a sham. It's not even shovel ready. They don't even have the chalk necessary to draw a picture of a hospital on a chalkboard. They don't even have that. What they have is the possibility of creating positions where there are no work for the next 10 years. So they're not talking about shovel-ready projects. They're not talking about fixing roads or infrastructure. They're talking about pipe dreams that the whole only end is to create a project coordinator assistant to the deputy of the assistant to the director of
we got to find work.
Operating the copier machine.
Remember, we got to find work for Jack Haddock.
Well, I have the ability to right click too, and check survey boxes. So maybe I should just build my resume and send it to Adeloop and have them create a job for me. I think that's how the way that works. They don't go through hire.guam.
I think first of all, you're supposed to either get busted for what was it that
official misconduct?
Yeah, you got to get busted for official misconduct, or else get fired from a government agency in order to get a job at the governor's office.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind working down at the port too. I mean, but besides drugs, what else can I do? I mean, to get a job down at the port. I mean, I qualify as an accountant. I think we all do to work down at the port. But anyways, it's just infuriating right now. It's infuriating. But I just want to pass on some good news and some volunteer stuff. Yeah, I'm on my way home. I decided to stop down here at Aston Park, the War Memorial, and I would just like to pass out a friendly reminder. Last year, we didn't have a flag display on Memorial Day down here in Aston because of the COVID, which back in our day, Bob, COVID stands for Chamorro Only Voting ID.
Okay.
It stands for something totally different now. But this year, they spread it out, and if you just contact the War in the Pacific, call them up, and they'll send you an email and a date in which you want to come down and help. Right now, they're clearing grass, and then as we get closer to Memorial Day, they'll be planting the flag. So, just come down here and help volunteer. I'll be volunteering on the 29th, which is a Saturday, and it's from 7 to 10 a.m. So, just come down and be a part of a great event, and just to spread the love to those who passed away and gave their ultimate sacrifice, and that's for this Memorial Park. And just can I give a little advice?
Sure.
To the Visitors Bureau?
Sure.
Do away with this whatever the expat stuff. The expats are already trying to get their shots done at the embassies. So, the best thing to do is link up government to government. And we have Memorial Day coming up. In Japan, they also have their own Memorial Day, which is on August 15th. It's a very highly recognized date. All officials attended. If we can just do something to secure August 15th to make the government officials come here by, the thousands, to help, because they will come. They will not turn away. And I think that will be a great startup date into, revitalizing our relationship with Japan and, reinvigorating, trying to get this hotel stuff going on again, because this expat stuff isn't going to do it. I don't know whose pipe dream they were talking about. I'm sorry, our good friend passed away a while ago. But he worked for a newspaper he worked for the newspaper back then, when we could say that back then also the New York Times probably had a good reputation. Now it's trash.
Yeah.
I think the PDN is going the same way. And when you mentioned about the article which Miss Limpiaco printed out, I mean, did it surprise you, considering the first forum that she posted was fairly loaded?
Yeah, there was a right answer. Yeah.
Excuse me?
There was a right answer for the first forum. So yeah, she was not playing against type. That's for sure, Jack.
That's true. And then as far as what really gets on my nerve is that they had this closed door meeting, and nobody, the press that was there, nobody bothered to complain. Yeah. Nobody said, "Hey, you can't do that." They all said, "Okay, we'll just sit out here. You guys go to the back." And if anything, that should be the topic of the forum. That should be the topic of the forum. Should two brown tree snakes go discuss which cocoa bird they're going to eat for dinner? That should be the topic.
Exactly.
Not this. And to your good friend, Senator Chris Duenas, I told you that dog don't bite. I told you a long time that dog don't bite. And thank goodness for Senator Brown. She has more balls than a pachinko machine down in Tumon. And I love her for it. I hope she stays and she continues on the right path. As for the rest of those, it's shameful. It's shameful. It's really shameful that they went that route. And the so-called press.
Hey, Jack,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for relieving me of the burden of a summary at the end of the show. See you later, Jack.
Okay.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Back up and running. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Colonial Fuel Pipeline that had been shut down over a ransomware attack.
Colonial Pipeline restarted the pipeline responsible for nearly half of the fuel consumed on the East Coast Wednesday evening, but says it will take several days for deliveries to return to normal. The company took the pipeline offline late last week after a ransomware attack by hackers, triggering fuel shortages and panic buying across the southeastern U.S.
Fox's Steve Rappaport. President Biden has signed an executive order directing all federal agencies to harden their cyber infrastructure against hacking and urging software makers to create products using new security standards and to share information about cybersecurity breaches. The violence at the Gaza Strip continues.
Hamas says they are firing once again long-range rockets towards the Jewish state. In the Gaza Strip, we have heard loud explosions. The Israeli Air Force targeting a number of high-rise buildings.
Fox's Trey Yingst. President Biden has called Prime Minister Netanyahu to reaffirm U.S. support for Israel. Secretary of State Blinken has spoken with Palestinian President Abbas to tell him the rocket attacks on Israel must come to an end. One of the first states to impose coronavirus restrictions is ending them. Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine.
It is time. It's time to end the health orders.
That includes the mask mandate, but restrictions will continue at Ohio nursing homes. The governor trying to incentivize the unvaccinated to get the shot by entering Ohioans who get the vaccine into 5 weekly drawings for $1 million. An Arapahoe County, Colorado sheriff's deputy says there are 2 pilots who should go out and buy a lottery ticket. Their planes collided in midair yesterday. One plane landed at the airport despite losing much of its tail. The other deployed a parachute that allowed the plane to float safely into a field. Both pilots and a passenger